The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, unmarked and impossible to trace. Evelyn Blackwood stood in the mailroom of the Washington Tribune, studying the package with the careful attention her 5 years in Army intelligence had drilled into her bones. No return address, no postage marks that made sense. Hand-delivered, she guessed, slipped into the building's internal mail system by someone who knew how to move through secured spaces without leaving footprints. She was 28 years old, lean and precise in her movements, with the kind of quiet intensity that made people underestimate her exactly once. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her gray eyes missed nothing. Those eyes had spent years analyzing signal intelligence in windowless rooms at Fort Meade, tracking money flows and communication patterns for targets who thought they were invisible. She'd left that world 3 years ago, trading the uniform for a press credential, but the skills remained. The instincts never left. The envelope felt wrong in her hands, too heavy for documents alone, too carefully weighted. She carried it to her desk, set it down, and stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside, a USB drive and a single sheet of paper. The paper held 4 words in laser-printed text. "They killed your father." Evelyn's hands went still. Her breathing continued at its normal rhythm. A trained response, automatic control when the world tried to tilt sideways. But something cold settled behind her ribs, spreading outward like frost across glass. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Blackwood had died 6 years ago in what the Army called a training accident. Equipment malfunctioned during a routine convoy exercise at Fort Benning. The official report said brake failure sent his vehicle off an embankment at 60 miles per hour. Catastrophic trauma, death instantaneous. She'd been 22, finishing her 3rd year in intelligence. They'd given her emergency leave to bury him. Full military honors. A folded flag. Empty words about sacrifice and service from officers who'd never met him. The investigation had been thorough, conclusive, and closed within 8 weeks. Evelyn picked up the USB drive, standard commercial model, the kind you could buy at any office supply store. No distinguishing marks. No serial number filed off. Too obvious, too amateur. Whoever sent this knew what they were doing. She glanced across the newsroom. Reporters hunched over keyboards, chasing deadlines and sources. The morning meeting had just broken up. She had maybe 20 minutes before anyone would miss her. Her desk computer was connected to the Tribune's network, completely unsuitable for examining unknown drives from anonymous sources. She pulled her personal laptop from her bag, the one she used for sensitive work, air-gapped from everything. She'd built it herself, installed the operating system from verified media, configured every security setting personally. The drive mounted with a soft click. Inside, a single encrypted archive. Whoever sent this expected her to have the tools to open it, expected her to still think like an intelligence analyst, not just a journalist. She did. 15 minutes later, she was reading documents that shouldn't exist. Internal memoranda from Thornhill Defense Industries, one of the Pentagon's largest contractors. Engineering reports, safety test results, procurement contracts, financial records showing payments to numbered accounts in the Cayman Islands. Names of Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, amounts that made her throat tight, and casualty reports. 23 American soldiers killed when their MH-60 Black Hawk went down in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. October 14th, 2019. She remembered that crash. Everyone in the intelligence community remembered it. Largest single-day loss of American life in theater that year. The official investigation blamed pilot error and unexpected weather conditions. These documents told a different story. Thornhill Defense had manufactured the helicopter's rotor assembly. The contract specified titanium alloy components, mil-spec grade, tested to withstand extreme stress conditions. The kind of materials that cost serious money and met exacting standards because lives depended on them. According to these files, Thornhill had substituted commercial-grade aluminum, cheaper, lighter, completely inadequate for combat conditions. The rotors had failed at altitude, catastrophic structural compromise, and 23 soldiers had fallen from the sky. The company knew. The engineering reports made that clear. Internal testing had flagged the problem 9 months before the crash. The chief engineer, a man named Sterling Hayes, had raised concerns in writing, demanded the contracts be fulfilled to specification. His concerns had been overridden by executive decision. The cheaper materials increased profit margins by 18% on a $400 million contract. $72 million, 23 lives. Evelyn felt her hands trembling and forced them still. The documents continued. She read methodically, building the picture piece by piece. Thornhill hadn't just cut corners on one contract. This was systematic. Years of fraudulent certifications, falsified test results, safety inspections rubber-stamped by Pentagon officials whose bank accounts showed regular deposits from shell companies traced, in these documents, directly back to Thornhill's offshore holdings. 12 Pentagon officials compromised. 8 members of congressional defense committees receiving payments. A network of corruption that had funneled billions in taxpayer money toward defective equipment and killed American soldiers through criminal negligence. And then she found the list. It was buried deep in the archive, encrypted a second time with a different algorithm. She almost missed it, but the file name caught her attention. Asset Neutralization Log. 9 names, dates, members, status. Sterling Hayes, Chief Engineer, March 22, 2019. Automobile accident, completed. Marcus Webb, Procurement Analyst, July 15, 2017. Suicide, completed. Patricia Morrison, Congressional Aide, November 3, 2018. Home invasion, completed. Thomas Blackwood, Lieutenant Colonel, Army Acquisition, March 14, 2018. Vehicle incident, staged brake failure, completed. The cold behind her ribs spread through her entire body. Her father hadn't died in a training accident. He'd been murdered. She sat motionless, staring at the screen, while the newsroom moved around her in its normal chaos. Phones rang. Keyboards clattered. Someone laughed at a colleague's joke. The world continued as if nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Thomas Blackwood had worked in Army acquisition during his final assignment. He'd overseen contract compliance, reviewed contractor submissions, flagged irregularities. She'd never known the details, operational security, but she'd understood the general shape of his work. He must have found something, started asking questions, gotten too close to whatever Thornhill was hiding, so they'd killed him and called it an accident. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Evelyn's head snapped up. Colonel Harrison Grayson stood beside her desk, coffee mug in hand, that familiar expression of weathered concern on his face. Flint, everyone called him Flint, a nickname earned through 3 decades of being the hardest substance in any room he entered, was 65 years old and looked like he'd been carved from granite and leather. Gray hair buzzed military short, shoulders still broad despite retirement, eyes that had seen things he'd never discuss, but that had left permanent shadows. He'd retired from the Army 5 years ago after serving as a senior acquisition officer, the kind of position that meant he knew where everybody was buried in the defense contracting world. He joined the Tribune as an editor shortly after, bringing connections and expertise that made him invaluable for their defense coverage. He was also the closest thing Evelyn had to family since her father died. "I need you to look at something," she said quietly. Privately, Flint's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition. He'd heard that tone before, in other contexts, when threats were real and time was short. Conference room 3, 5 minutes. He walked away without waiting for confirmation. Evelyn copied the files to an encrypted partition on a separate drive, wiped her laptop's cache, and powered everything down. She moved through the newsroom with deliberate casualness, just another reporter heading to a meeting. Conference room 3 was small, windowless, and at the end of a hallway where conversations wouldn't carry. Flint was already there, door closed, blinds drawn on the interior window. She plugged in her laptop and showed him everything. He read in silence for 20 minutes. His face remained absolutely still, but she watched his jaw tighten incrementally. His fingers drummed once against the table, then stopped. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Where did you get this?" "Anonymous delivery this morning." "You verified the source?" "The documents are genuine. I've cross-referenced the contract numbers with public procurement databases. The financial routing codes match known shell company patterns. The metadata on the files shows they originated from Thornhill's internal servers." "That's not what I asked." Evelyn met his eyes. "No, I have no idea who sent them, but they knew about my father. They knew I'd have the skills to access this, and they knew I'd care enough to act." Flint leaned back in his chair. "Your father was investigating Thornhill when he died. It wasn't a question." "You knew?" "I suspected. Tom and I served together, early in our careers. We stayed in touch. The last time we spoke, about 2 weeks before his death, he mentioned some irregularities he'd found in contractor submissions. Said it felt bigger than the usual corner cutting. He was being careful, building a case before making noise." "He never got the chance." "No." Flint's voice was flat. "The accident investigation was rushed, concluded too quickly. I tried to push for a more thorough review, but I was told to let it rest. Orders from above. I didn't have enough to fight back." "Now we do?" "No." Flint's voice hardened. "Now you have a target on your back from people who've already killed 9 times to protect this secret. You have evidence that can destroy one of the largest defense contractors in America and implicate dozens of senior officials. You have something that powerful people will do anything to suppress. Then we need to publish it." "Evelyn, they killed my father. They killed 23 soldiers. They're stealing billions while American kids die in the desert with equipment that's designed to fail. What exactly do you think we should do instead?" Flint stood and walked to the window, staring through the closed blinds at nothing. "Your father tried this. You know how it ended. Which is exactly why I have to finish it." He turned back to her. "Thornhill Defense has an annual revenue of $14 billion. They employ 37,000 people across 12 states. They have contracts with every branch of the military. They spend $40 million a year on lobbying. Their CEO, Bradford Thornhill, is a retired 4-star general with direct access to the Joint Chiefs and half the Senate Armed Services Committee. I know who he is." "Then you know what you're walking into. This isn't some mid-level bureaucrat taking kickbacks. This is institutional corruption with the resources to bury you so deep nobody will ever find the body. They already tried that with my father, and they succeeded." The words hung in the air between them. Evelyn's voice dropped to something cold and precise. "Then they made a mistake, leaving me alive to finish what he started." Flint studied her for a long moment. She could see him measuring, calculating, running through scenarios the way he'd done for 30 years in acquisition battles and budget fights and all the small wars that happened in Pentagon conference rooms. Finally, he nodded once. "If we do this, we do it right. No cowboy journalism. No rushing to publish because you're angry. We verify every detail. We build an airtight case. We protect our sources and ourselves. We assume Thornhill has people inside every relevant agency and plan accordingly." "Agreed." "And we start by finding Sterling Hayes." Evelyn pulled up the file on the chief engineer who'd raised the initial concerns. "According to this, he died in an automobile accident 5 years ago." "According to Thornhill's list, yes. But I know Sterling Hayes. We worked together on procurement reviews before I retired. He was paranoid about contractor retaliation, came from a family of whistleblowers, understood the risks. If anyone had a dead man switch or contingency plan, it would be him." "You think he faked his death?" "I think he's either dead or very well hidden. Either way, we need to find out which. He's the key witness. If he's alive and willing to talk, he can verify everything in these documents. Flint pulled out his phone and started making calls. Not from his Tribune cell, Evelyn noticed, but from a personal device he pulled from an interior jacket pocket. Old habits from intelligence work, multiple phones for multiple purposes, never mix operational security. She used the time to dig deeper into the financial records. The money trail was sophisticated, but not perfect. Thornhill had used a network of shell companies and offshore accounts, but they'd gotten sloppy in places. Payments that should have been staggered came through in recognizable patterns. Names appeared in multiple contexts. If you knew what to look for, and 5 years of tracking terrorist financing had taught her exactly what to look for, the network revealed itself. 12 Pentagon officials. She started building profiles on each one. Their positions, their access to contracts, when they'd started receiving payments, how much they'd taken. The amounts varied. Some had sold out for $50,000. Others had taken millions over years. It didn't matter. They'd all signed off on equipment they knew was defective. They'd all sent soldiers into combat with gear designed to fail. They were all complicit in murder. Flint ended his third call and sat back down. Sterling Hayes hasn't been seen in 5 years. After his supposed accident, his wife collected the life insurance and moved to Oregon. I have a contact trying to locate her now. What about the other names on the list? The ones still alive? Most went silent after their listed incidents, either actually dead or scared enough to disappear. He paused. There's one exception, Patricia Morrison, the congressional aide. Her death was ruled a home invasion, but her sister never believed it. The sister, named Catherine Morrison, works as a defense attorney in Baltimore, has been trying to get the case reopened for 6 years. She might talk to us. She might, or she might think we're part of the setup. We'd need to approach carefully. Evelyn's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your personal email. Secure account only. She froze. The only people who had her secure email address were sources she'd cultivated over months. People who'd verified her credentials and trustworthiness through multiple channels. She pulled up the account on her laptop. One new message. No sender name. Subject line. They're watching. The message body contained a single image attachment. It was a photograph of her apartment building taken from across the street. Timestamp from this morning, less than an hour ago. A red circle highlighted her third-floor window. A second attachment loaded, another photograph. Her car in the Tribune parking garage. Same red circle around her license plate. The third attachment was a video file. She played it. Grainy surveillance footage from inside her apartment. The camera angle suggested it was from her smoke detector, standard concealment point. The timestamp ran through the previous night. She watched herself come home from work, make dinner, work on her laptop at her kitchen table, go to bed. Someone had been inside her apartment, had installed cameras, had been watching her. The email ended with a single line of text. You received the package. Now they know. Get out. Evelyn looked at Flint. We have a problem. She showed him the email, watched his expression go from concerned to dangerous. How long have you had the USB drive? 3 hours. Then we probably have less than that before they make a move. He stood abruptly. Pack a go bag. Nothing from your apartment. Assume everything there is compromised. We leave in 30 minutes. Where are we going? Somewhere they won't look. I have a place. Evelyn started to ask more questions, then stopped. Flint had been doing this longer than she'd been alive. If he said move, you moved. She spent the next 20 minutes preparing, copied all the Thornhill files to multiple encrypted drives, downloaded every piece of relevant research from the Tribune's servers, sent carefully worded messages to 3 trusted contacts in the intelligence community, people who'd understand the implications without needing details. Then she cleared her desk, wiped her work computer, and walked out of the Tribune building with nothing but her laptop bag and the clothes on her back. Flint was waiting in the parking garage, standing beside a vehicle she'd never seen him drive. An older pickup truck, probably registered to someone else. The kind of operational security that came from decades of careful paranoia. "Get in." They drove in silence for 20 minutes, taking a random route through DC traffic. Flint watched the mirrors constantly. Evelyn did the same, cataloging vehicles, looking for patterns, checking for tails. Nothing obvious. But if Thornhill was sophisticated enough to install cameras in her apartment without triggering her security system, they were sophisticated enough to follow without being seen. They crossed into Virginia, took surface streets through suburban sprawl, and eventually turned onto a private road that wound through woods for 2 miles before reaching a farmhouse set back from everything. The house was old but well-maintained, surrounded by open fields with clear sightlines, a single access road easily monitored, defensive positions along the tree line. Flint parked in a detached garage and killed the engine. "This was my father's place. Left it to me when he died. I use it maybe twice a year. Keep it off all my official records. Nobody knows about it except family. And now me. And now you." They went inside. The house was simply furnished, clean, stocked with supplies. The kind of place you maintain for emergencies. Bug-out location. Safe house. Whatever you wanted to call the spot where you ran when the world turned hostile. Flint pulled out his phone again, made another call. "Gus, it's Flint. I need the team. Yes, now. Virginia location. I'll send coordinates." He paused, listening. "No, worse than that. I'll brief when you get here." He ended the call and looked at Evelyn. "We're going to have company in a few hours. People I trust with my life. Old unit, still active in various capacities. They'll provide security while we figure out our next move." "You think we need armed security? Your father had vehicle trouble that killed him. Sterling Hayes had vehicle trouble that supposedly killed him. These people don't make dramatic statements. They make problems disappear quietly. If they know you have those files, they'll come. And they won't knock first." Evelyn set up her laptop at the kitchen table and continued working, cross-referencing names, building timelines, mapping the network of corruption. The work was familiar, almost meditative. This was what she'd done in the Army. Take scattered intelligence, find the patterns, build the picture of how an organization actually functioned. Thornhill Defense Industries had been systemically defrauding the Pentagon for at least 15 years. The documents showed contracts going back to 2008, all with the same patterns. Substitute cheaper materials, falsify test results, pay off inspectors, submit fraudulent certifications. The helicopter crash that killed 23 soldiers was just the most dramatic failure. There had been others. Equipment malfunctions, weapon systems that didn't meet specifications, communication gear that failed in combat conditions. Each failure had been investigated. Each investigation had been controlled by officials on Thornhill's payroll. Each conclusion had protected the company. And anyone who got too close to the truth ended up on the asset neutralization log. 9 names, 9 deaths disguised as accidents or suicides or random violence. Her father was number 4. She stared at his entry, reading the details over and over. They'd cut his brake lines, made it look like mechanical failure. Probably hired someone professional, someone who knew how to stage accidents that would pass investigation. The official report had never looked deeper. Why would it? Equipment fails sometimes. Tragic accidents happen. Except it wasn't an accident. It was murder. Calculated, paid for, executed as casually as any other business expense. Evelyn felt the anger building in her chest, hot and sharp. She welcomed it. Anger was useful. Anger could be shaped into purpose, channeled into action. Her father had died trying to expose this. 23 soldiers had died because of it. Dozens, maybe hundreds more, had been put at risk by equipment that didn't meet basic safety standards. Someone had to stop it. Someone had to make them pay. Flint came back into the kitchen carrying a lockbox. He set it on the table and opened it, revealing 2 handguns and several loaded magazines. You still qualified? I shoot twice a month. Range time. Good. These are clean, untraceable if necessary. Keep one on you at all times. He slid a Glock 19 across the table. I know you'd rather this stay investigative journalism, but we're past that now. The moment they put cameras in your apartment, this became a tactical situation. Evelyn picked up the weapon, checked it automatically. Magazine, chamber, safety. The movements were muscle memory, ingrained from hundreds of hours of training. She'd never fired at a person, never wanted to, but she'd do what was necessary. When does this Gus arrive? 2 hours. He's bringing 3 others, all former special forces, all people I'd trust with my life. They'll establish a perimeter, make sure we're not surprised. And then we verify what we can, build the case, and find a way to publish that doesn't get us killed in the process. Flint sat down across from her. Evelyn, I need you to understand something. Your father was my friend. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have helped him. I would have fought beside him. I didn't, and that's something I have to live with. This isn't your fault. No, but it's my responsibility now. Tom started this investigation. He died for it. You're finishing it. That makes it my fight too. He paused. I'm with you all the way. Whatever it takes. However far this goes. She met his eyes and saw the same cold determination she felt. However far it goes. They worked in silence after that, building the case piece by piece. The sun tracked across the sky outside. Shadows lengthened. Evelyn's phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. They're coming for you tonight. Hayes is alive. Oregon. Find him first. She showed Flint. He swore quietly. Gus needs to get here faster. He made another call, spoke in terse sentences, then hung up. They're 20 minutes out. The message says tonight. Then we hold through tonight and move in the morning. Hayes first. If he's alive and willing to testify, we have a witness. Combined with these documents, that might be enough to force a legitimate investigation. Might be. Thornhill has spent years building protection. Breaking through that takes more than evidence. It takes pressure from multiple directions. Congressional oversight, FBI investigation, media exposure, all coordinated so they can't suppress one piece without the others still moving forward. How do we coordinate that? Carefully, one step at a time. First we find Hayes, then we verify his story, then we bring in allies who can't be bought. Flint pulled up a contact list on his phone. I know people at Justice, Inspector General's office, congressional staffers who aren't on Thornhill's payroll. We build a coalition before we go public. Headlights appeared in the distance, coming up the private road. Flint moved to the window, watched. That's Gus. 4 men climbed out of a nondescript SUV. The leader was 68 years old, built like he'd been assembled from reinforced concrete. His face was weathered, scarred, with eyes that had seen everything worth seeing and remained unimpressed. Brigadier General Augustus Pemberton, retired. Flint had served under him decades ago. They'd stayed in touch, the kind of bond that came from shared combat and mutual respect. Gus walked in like he owned the place, assessed Evelyn in one glance, and extended a hand. You're Tom Blackwood's daughter. Yes, sir. I knew your father. Good man, honest, stubborn as hell. He released her hand. Flint says you've kicked over a hornet's nest. Something like that. Good. I hate hornets. He turned to his team. Perimeter positions. Standard rotation. Nobody comes down that road without us knowing. The 3 men with him moved out without comment. Professional. Efficient. The kind of people who'd done this 1,000 times. Gus sat down at the table. Show me what you've got. They briefed him on everything. The USB drive, the documents, the asset neutralization log, the cameras in Evelyn's apartment, the warning about tonight. Gus listened without interruption. his expression unchanging. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Thornhill Defense," he said finally. "Bradford Thornhill, four-star general, retired. I knew him in the Army. Ambitious, ruthless, smart enough to know how to work the system." He paused. "And corrupt enough to think rules were for other people." "You suspected?" "I knew. Not details, but I knew the kind of man he was. After he retired and started Thornhill Defense, I watched them win contracts they shouldn't have won. Watched competitors get frozen out. Watched the company grow too fast on deals that didn't make sense." He shook his head. "But knowing and proving are different things. I didn't have evidence. Now you do. Can we use it?" "If you live long enough, yes." Gus stood and walked to the window. "They're coming tonight. Professional team. They'll make it look like a home invasion gone wrong, or a tragic fire, or whatever fits the circumstances. If they're smart, and they are, they'll try to destroy the evidence at the same time they eliminate the threat." Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "So what do? We make them regret the attempt." Gus smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "I've been waiting for an excuse to hurt people who betray the uniform. Looks like Christmas came early." The next 3 hours passed in tense preparation. Gus's team established defensive positions around the property, motion sensors in the woods, cameras on the access road, clear fields of fire from elevated positions. Inside, Flint and Evelyn continued working, building backup upon backup of the evidence, uploading encrypted copies to secure servers, establishing dead man switches that would trigger publication if they didn't check in regularly. If Thornhill killed them tonight, the evidence would still get out. That knowledge was strangely comforting. 11 p.m. arrived, then midnight. The house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen, where Evelyn sat with her laptop, still working. Gus appeared in the doorway. Motion sensors just picked up 4 vehicles, lights off, approaching from the main road. ETA 12 minutes. Evelyn saved her work and closed the laptop, picked up the Glock Flint had given her, checked it again, even though she'd checked it 6 times already. "Positions? You and Flint stay in the interior room, 2nd floor, reinforced walls. My team handles the approach. If anyone gets past us, you know what to do." "I know." She followed Flint upstairs to what had probably been a bedroom, but now looked like a tactical position. Reinforced door, ballistic panels on the walls, clear sight lines to the stairwell. They waited in silence. Outside, engines cut off in the distance. Men would be moving through the woods now, professional and quiet, expecting an easy target. They were wrong about easy. Evelyn heard the first shots 15 minutes later. Suppressed weapons, barely audible even in the quiet farmhouse. Then louder reports, Gus's team returning fire. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes. Then silence. Flint's phone buzzed. A text from Gus. 4 down, all hostile, no friendly casualties. Police won't be an issue. Evelyn exhaled slowly. They came. And they failed. Flint stood, moved to the window. That was a professional hit team. Expensive, well-equipped. Thornhill sent his best. What happens now? Now we disappear before they send more. Flint pulled out his phone. I'm calling in favors, getting us to Oregon. Hayes is our priority. Downstairs, Gus was coordinating cleanup, the kind of cleanup that made problems disappear without official complications. The kind of network you built over 40 years of special operations. Evelyn packed her laptop, checked her weapons, prepared to run. Somewhere in Oregon, Sterling Hayes was alive and hiding. He was the key to everything. The witness who could verify the documents, testify to the conspiracy, put names and faces to the corruption. They had to find him before Thornhill did, and they had to do it while staying alive long enough to expose the truth. Her father had died trying. 23 soldiers had died because of what he'd tried to stop. She wouldn't fail them. Whatever it took, however far this went, she was Thomas Blackwood's daughter, and she was going to finish what he started. The safe house in rural Oregon sat at the end of a gravel road that hadn't seen maintenance in a decade. Flint had made 3 calls during the flight west, each conversation brief and coded, the kind of communication that happened between people who'd spent careers operating in shadows. By the time their rental car pulled up to the weathered cabin, arrangements had been made. Sterling Hayes's widow lived 20 miles south in a town called Ridgemont, population 800, the kind of place where strangers were noticed and questions were asked. They'd need to approach carefully. Evelyn stood on the cabin's porch, watching dawn break over the Cascade Mountains. She'd slept 2 hours on the plane, another hour in the car. Her body was running on adrenaline and purpose, the kind of operational tempo she remembered from deployments. You pushed through fatigue because the mission demanded it. You dealt with exhaustion later. Gus emerged from the cabin carrying coffee. He'd flown out separately with one of his team members, establishing security before Evelyn and Flint arrived. The man was 68 years old and moved like he could still pass Army Ranger physical fitness tests. The widow's name is Jennifer Hayes, lives alone in a house her husband bought before he supposedly died, works part-time at the local library, keeps to herself, no social media presence, no public record of ever remarrying or leaving the area. Evelyn accepted the coffee. If Sterling faked his death, she'd know. Question is whether she'd tell us. Gus leaned against the porch railing. Woman's been living a quiet life for 5 years. 2 strangers show up asking about her dead husband, about defense contractors and conspiracies. She's got every reason to slam the door in our faces. We need trust. Flint joined them on the porch. I knew Sterling. Not well, but we worked together on procurement reviews. He trusted me then. Maybe that counts for something. They spent the morning preparing. Flint made contact with Jennifer Hayes through a series of carefully staged coincidences. A mutual acquaintance from Sterling's old job. A message passed through trusted channels. Nothing direct, nothing that would spook her if she was being monitored. The response came at noon. A phone call to a number Flint had provided. Jennifer's voice was cautious, measured. You knew my husband? Yes, ma'am. We worked together on procurement oversight. I was sorry to hear about his passing. Silence on the other end. Then, why are you in Oregon? I'd like to talk to you about Sterling's work, specifically about Thornhill Defense Industries. I believe the accident that killed him might not have been an accident. More silence. When she spoke again, her voice was harder. You should leave this alone. I can't. People are still dying because of what Sterling found. I need to know what he knew. He's dead. There's nothing more to tell. Mrs. Hayes, my name is Harrison Grayson. I'm with the Washington Tribune. The woman with me is Evelyn Blackwood. Her father, Thomas Blackwood, was murdered by Thornhill 6 years ago. We have evidence, documents. We're trying to stop them before they kill anyone else. The silence stretched longer this time. Evelyn could hear breathing on the other end, could almost feel the woman weighing risks and trust and the cost of staying silent. The coffee shop on Main Street, 2 o'clock, come alone. The line went dead. Ridgemont looked like a postcard of small-town America. Tree-lined streets, local businesses in brick buildings that had stood for generations. People who nodded hello to strangers because that's what you did. The coffee shop occupied a corner lot with windows facing 2 directions. Good sight lines, multiple exits. Evelyn approved of the choice, even as she scanned for threats. Jennifer Hayes sat at a corner table, back to the wall, positioned where she could see the entire room. She was in her late 40s, dressed simply, with the kind of worn carefulness that came from years of looking over her shoulder. Evelyn and Flint approached slowly, hands visible, movements non-threatening. Mrs. Hayes, thank you for meeting us. Jennifer studied them both. Her eyes were intelligent, suspicious, searching. Show me identification. They did. She examined their credentials carefully, took photos with her phone, then gestured for them to sit. You said you have evidence about Thornhill. Evelyn pulled out a tablet, opened an encrypted file. internal company documents, engineering reports, financial records, a list of 9 people Thornhill has killed to protect their fraud. Your husband's name is on that list. Jennifer looked at the screen. Her expression didn't change, but her hands tightened around her coffee cup. Where did you get this? Someone sent it to me anonymously. Someone who wants Thornhill exposed, but can't do it themselves. Jennifer read through the documents in silence. When she reached the asset neutralization log, she stopped. Her finger traced Sterling's entry. The date, the method, the status. They tried to kill him, she said quietly. Cut the brake lines on his car. He survived the initial crash, crawled out of the wreckage, called me from a burner phone while he was hiding in the woods. Evelyn leaned forward. He's alive. I can't tell you where he is. We're not asking you to. We're asking you to get a message to him. Tell him we have evidence. Tell him we can protect him if he's willing to testify. Jennifer shook her head. You don't understand. Thornhill isn't just a company. It's a network. Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, private contractors. They have resources you can't imagine. We've already survived one assassination attempt. Flint's voice was calm. 4-man hit team sent to kill us 3 nights ago. They failed. We're still here, still working, still building the case. Then they'll send more. Probably. But every attempt they make leaves evidence. Every move exposes their network. We're not running. We're fighting back. Jennifer was quiet for a long time. Outside, traffic moved slowly down Main Street. Normal life continuing in a town that had no idea what kind of conversation was happening in its coffee shop. Sterling spent 10 years at Thornhill, Jennifer finally said. Started as a junior engineer, worked his way up to chief engineer. He believed in the work, believed they were serving the country, protecting soldiers. Then he found the substitution scheme. She told them everything. How Sterling had discovered the fraud, how he'd reported it internally and been silenced, how he'd started working with Patricia Morrison, building a case they'd planned to take to Congress, how Patricia had been murdered in what looked like a home invasion, how Sterling had known he was next. 6 months after Patricia died, his car had brake failure on a mountain road, Jennifer said. Should have died. Would have died if he hadn't been driving defensively, if he hadn't been paranoid enough to check his vehicle every morning. Her eyes were distant, remembering. He called me from the woods, said they'd tried to kill him, said he had to disappear, said if I loved him, I had to let him go. Her voice broke slightly on the last words. I filed the insurance claim, Jennifer continued, had a funeral with a closed casket, played the grieving widow, moved to Oregon to start over. Nobody suspected. Why would they? Sterling Hayes died in a car accident. Case closed. But he's been watching. From a distance, we have protocols, ways to communicate without being traced. It's not a life, it's existence, but it's better than both of us being dead. Flint pulled out a secure phone. Can you get a message to him? Tell him we need to meet, face to face. We have evidence that can corroborate everything he knows. Combined testimony, we can bring Thornhill down. He won't come out of hiding, not for anything. Even to stop them from killing more soldiers? More whistleblowers? Evelyn's voice was quiet but intense. They murdered my father. They murdered 23 soldiers with defective equipment. They'll keep killing until someone stops them. Sterling has the technical expertise to prove the fraud. We have the documentation. Together we can end this. Jennifer looked at her for a long moment. You're as stubborn as your father was. Tom Blackwood never quit either. You knew him? Sterling mentioned him, said there was another investigator looking into Thornhill, said maybe they should coordinate. She shook her head. Then Tom died, and Sterling knew he was next. The pieces were falling into place. Thomas Blackwood and Sterling Hayes, working independently toward the same goal, both discovering the same conspiracy, both targeted for elimination. Her father had died. Sterling had survived. Now it was time to finish what they'd both started. Please, Evelyn said, ask him to meet with us. One conversation. We'll take every precaution, but we need his testimony. Jennifer stood abruptly. I need to think about this. It's not my decision alone. How long? 24 hours. I'll contact you. She left before either of them could respond. Back at the safe house, Evelyn dove deeper into the evidence. What she found made the initial documents look like preliminary sketches. Thornhill Defense wasn't working alone. The financial records showed coordination between 6 major defense contractors, price fixing, bid rigging, market allocation. They'd carved up the Pentagon's budget like crime families dividing territory. Northridge Systems, Apex Military Solutions, Sentinel Technologies, Garrison Industries, Patriot Defense Group, and Thornhill. Together, they controlled $47 billion in annual defense spending. The conspiracy went back 18 years, starting small in 2006, growing bolder as they learned how to game the system. By 2015, they were operating with impunity, falsifying test results, substituting substandard materials, paying off inspectors, bribing officials, and killing anyone who got too close. The asset neutralization log wasn't just Thornhill's. It was shared between all 6 companies. 9 deaths spread across the coalition, each company contributing to the fund that paid for contract killers and staged accidents. Evelyn's father had stumbled into something far bigger than a single corrupt contractor. He'd found an entire industry rotting from the inside. Her phone buzzed at 3 in the morning. A text from an unknown number, routed through encryption that made it untraceable. Nathaniel Thornhill wants to meet. He has information you need. Tomorrow, noon, coordinates attached. Come alone. She stared at the message. Nathaniel Thornhill, Bradford Thornhill's son, EVP of Thornhill Defense. According to the documents, he'd signed off on dozens of fraudulent contracts. This was either the break they needed or the most obvious trap in the history of investigations. She showed the message to Flint and Gus. Flint's reaction was immediate. Absolutely not. It's a setup. Maybe. Or maybe he's the source who sent the original documents. Why would Bradford Thornhill's son betray his own company? I don't know, but the message came through the same encryption protocol as the original warnings. Same routing pattern, same security measures. Evelyn pulled up the metadata. Whoever this is, they've been helping us from the beginning. Gus studied the coordinates. Meeting point is public. Downtown Portland, Pioneer Courthouse Square. Lots of witnesses. Difficult to stage an accident or ambush without being seen. Which could mean it's legitimate, or it could mean they're confident enough to act in public. The argument continued for another hour. Finally, reluctantly, Flint and Gus agreed to let her make the meeting, but with conditions. Full surveillance, multiple backup positions, armed teams ready to intervene, every precaution they could manage. The next morning, Jennifer Hayes called. Sterling will meet with you, but not in Oregon, not anywhere near here. He'll contact you with a location. When? When he's ready. Could be days. He needs to establish security protocols first. We don't have days. Thornhill knows we're building a case. They'll be moving to shut us down. Sterling's been running for 5 years. He's not going to rush now. Jennifer's voice softened slightly. He wants to help. He wants to stop them, but he won't sacrifice his life doing it. I understand, but people are dying while we wait. People have been dying for 15 years. A few more days won't change that. The line went dead. Evelyn packed for Portland, Glock in a concealed holster, backup magazine, phone with emergency contacts, every piece of identification and documentation she might need. They drove to Portland in 2 vehicles, Gus and his team in one, establishing positions around Pioneer Courthouse Square. Flint and Evelyn in the other, arriving separately, approaching from different angles. The square was crowded. Lunch hour in downtown Portland brought hundreds of people, office workers, tourists, street performers. The kind of density that made security difficult, but also made targeted violence complicated. Evelyn spotted Nathaniel Thornhill immediately. He sat on a bench near the center of the square, wearing an expensive suit that marked him as out of place among the casual downtown crowd. Mid-40s, dark hair going gray at the temples, the kind of polished appearance that came from corporate boardrooms and country clubs. He looked exhausted. She approached carefully, scanning for threats. Gus's voice came through her earpiece. 4 potential hostiles at 3 o'clock. Watching your approach. Could be Thornhill security. Acknowledged. She sat down on the bench, maintaining distance. Mr. Thornhill. Miss Blackwood. His voice was quiet, controlled. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I should. Smart. He pulled out a phone, tapped the screen, then set it between them. This device is generating white noise at a frequency that defeats most listening equipment. We can talk freely. You sent the documents. No, my mother sent them. Margaret Thornhill. But I've been helping her, gathering evidence, building the case, waiting for the right moment. Evelyn felt something shift in her understanding. Your mother? She's been married to Bradford for 45 years, stood by him through everything, until the helicopter crash. Nathaniel's voice was hollow. Her godson was one of the 23 soldiers killed. Captain Brendan Sullivan, 24 years old. She'd known him since he was born, watched him grow up, watched him join the army, watched him die because my father wanted to save $72 million. So she started documenting his crimes. Everything. Video recordings of executive meetings, financial records, offshore account details. She spent 3 years building an airtight case, but she couldn't go public herself. She'd be the first person they'd suspect, the first person they'd silence. So she found me. She found you because your father was trying to do the same thing. She knew Tom Blackwood was investigating Thornhill. She watched him die for it. When she saw you'd become a journalist, she saw her chance. Evelyn absorbed this. Why are you telling me this now? Because I have a son, 16 years old, wants to join the army when he graduates, wants to serve his country. Nathaniel's voice cracked slightly. How do I let him do that, knowing the equipment might be defective because of decisions I signed off on? How do I send my son into combat with gear my company deliberately sabotaged? You could have gone to the authorities directly and been silenced like your father, like Sterling Hayes, like everyone else who got too close. Nathaniel shook his head. My father has people everywhere. Pentagon, Justice Department, FBI. We couldn't trust official channels, so my mother found you. Someone with motivation and skills. Someone who'd fight because it was personal. What do you want from me? I want to testify. I have additional evidence, current contracts, ongoing witness protection for my family, and one other thing. What? I want my father to know it was me. I want him to understand. Smaller scale, but it would have triggered investigations. So my father arranged an accident. Skiing trip in Colorado. Avalanche that killed William and 2 other people to make it look random. You can prove this? I have the communications, the payments to the guide who took them into unstable terrain, the insurance documents that show my father collected $20 million, all of it on this drive. Evelyn looked at the device in her hand. This was it, everything they needed. Documentary. The 4 men were closing in, professional, coordinated, not making a scene but definitely positioning for intervention. Evelyn stood. We need to leave, now. I have a car nearby, follow me. They moved through the crowd. The security team adjusted, maintaining distance but staying close. Gus's team shadowed from different angles, weapons concealed but ready. Nathaniel led her to a parking garage 2 blocks away. They were halfway there when one of the security team's phones rang. Evelyn watched him answer, saw his expression change. They're going to grab you, she said quietly. Run. They ran. The garage erupted into chaos, security team converging from multiple directions, Gus's people intercepting, civilians screaming and diving for cover. Evelyn had her weapon out, using parked cars for cover, moving toward the exit. Nathaniel stayed close, surprisingly calm for a corporate executive in a gunfight. Flint's voice in her ear. Extraction vehicle at the north exit, 30 seconds. They made it with 20 to spare. Slid into the back of an SUV that accelerated before the doors were fully closed. Behind them, Thornhill's security team was locked in a standoff with Gus's people. No shots fired, but the message was clear. This was war now. In the vehicle, Evelyn examined the USB drive. Nathaniel sat beside her, breathing hard, adrenaline wearing off. Your father will know you betrayed him. Good. Let him spend his last free hours knowing his own blood destroyed him. They drove for 2 hours, taking random routes, checking for surveillance. Finally stopped at a different safe house, this one closer to Seattle. Evelyn plugged in the drive. What she found was devastating. Current contracts worth $12 billion, all fraudulent. Officials in the current administration receiving payments. Congressional leadership compromised. A network that went deeper than anything in the original documents. And video evidence. Nathaniel and Margaret had recorded executive meetings. Bradford Thornhill on camera, explicitly discussing bribery, fraud, and the elimination of witnesses, including orders for Thomas Blackwood's murder. Evelyn watched her father's death being planned, watched Bradford Thornhill calmly discuss brake line sabotage like it was a minor business expense, watched him approve the payment to the contractor who'd execute the hit. She felt tears on her face and didn't wipe them away. Flint stood beside her, watching the same video, his expression carved from stone. We have him, she whispered. Yes, now we need to stay alive long enough to use it. That evening, Nathaniel received a call from his ex-wife. Their son, 16-year-old William Jr., named for Nathaniel's dead brother, had been followed home from school by 2 men in a black SUV. They didn't approach him, she said, voice shaking. Just followed, watched, then drove away. Nathaniel, what have you done? He told her everything. The investigation, the betrayal of his father, the evidence he'd provided. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. You're protecting him now, she finally said. Your son. You're making sure the equipment won't kill him if he joins the army. Yes. Then I'll take William to my sister's in Montana, tonight. But Nathaniel, your father will never forgive this. I know. That's why I'm doing it. The call ended. Nathaniel looked at Evelyn. My father just threatened my son. That's his answer to my betrayal. He'll kill William Jr. the same way he killed William Sr. We'll protect him. Federal marshals, witness protection if necessary. You can't protect him from Bradford Thornhill. Nobody can. Which is why this has to end. Now, we go public and destroy my father completely, or my son dies. The stakes had just become absolute. Evelyn's phone buzzed. A message from Sterling Hayes, routed through Jennifer. I'll meet you, but it has to be now. Thornhill knows you have Nathaniel. They're moving to shut everything down. We have 48 hours before they scatter and destroy evidence. Meet me in Seattle. Coordinates attached. Tomorrow morning. Everything was accelerating. The careful investigation becoming a race against time. Evelyn looked at Flint, then at Nathaniel, then at the evidence spread across her laptop screen. We go public, she said. All of it, every document, every video, every name. We release it simultaneously to every major news outlet, Congressional Oversight Committee, and law enforcement agency. We flood the zone so completely they can't suppress it. That makes us targets for the rest of our lives. We're already targets. At least this way the truth gets out first. Flint nodded slowly. Then we need allies. People who can't be bought. Who'll push this investigation no matter what pressure they face. I know someone at the FBI, Gus said. Deputy director, old friend, hates corruption more than he hates anything. If we give him this evidence, he'll run with it. And I know congressional staffers, Nathaniel added. People my father hasn't managed to compromise. People who've been waiting for a chance to take him down. They spent the night building the distribution plan, coordinating contacts, preparing evidence packages, setting up dead man switches that would trigger automatic release if anything happened to them. By dawn, they were ready. Sterling Hayes' meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., a public park in Seattle, open sight lines, multiple exits, the kind of location that favored the prepared and paranoid. Evelyn didn't sleep. She kept working, kept refining the case, kept building connections between documents and testimony and video evidence. Her father had died for this. 23 soldiers had died because of this. Sterling Hayes had lost 5 years of his life running from this. Tomorrow, it would end. One way or another, the truth would come out, and Bradford Thornhill would pay for every life he destroyed. The rain started at dawn, typical Seattle weather that turned the city gray and soft around the edges. Evelyn stood at the window of their hotel room, watching water streak down the glass, thinking about her father and all the mornings he'd never see. Sterling Hayes had chosen Volunteer Park for the meeting. Smart location, open enough to detect surveillance, public enough to discourage direct action, remote enough for serious conversation. The kind of tradecraft you learn from years of looking over your shoulder. Flint checked his weapon for the third time. Gus has 4 positions around the park. Nathaniel stays here with 2 of his team. If this goes wrong, he's our insurance policy. Nathaniel sat at the desk, typing furiously on his laptop. He'd been coordinating with his congressional contacts since 3 in the morning, setting up meetings, arranging briefings, building the coalition that would push this investigation forward once it broke public. FBI Deputy Director confirmed for this afternoon, he said without looking up. Senator Morrison's staff scheduled for 4 p.m. Washington Post and New York Times both have investigative teams standing by. We go live at 6 p.m. Eastern with simultaneous releases. 12 hours. They had 12 hours to get Sterling's testimony, verify the final details, and prepare for the explosion that would follow publication. 12 hours before Bradford Thornhill's world came apart. Evelyn pulled on a jacket, checked her concealed holster, and headed for the door. Let's go meet a ghost. The park was nearly empty in the rain. A few joggers moving through the drizzle. Dog walkers hurrying their animals along muddy paths. The kind of morning where sensible people stayed inside. Evelyn walked slowly along the main trail, scanning faces, checking sight lines, looking for anything out of place. Gus's voice came through her earpiece, calm and professional. Target approaching from the northeast, solo, matches description, no visible tail. Sterling Hayes looked older than his photo. 5 years of living in hiding had carved lines into his face, turned his hair completely gray, left him with the permanent wariness of someone who'd survived when he shouldn't have. He wore nondescript outdoor gear, carried a backpack, moved with the careful attention of prey animals in dangerous territory. He stopped 10 feet away. Evelyn Blackwood. Mr. Hayes, thank you for coming. Jennifer said you have evidence, said you're trying to finish what your father started. His voice was rough, unused to much conversation. I need to see it before I commit to anything. She pulled out a tablet, showed him the documents, watched his expression change as he recognized his own engineering reports, his own complaints and warnings, all the evidence he'd compiled before being forced to run. Where did you get this? Nathaniel Thornhill, Bradford's son, and Margaret Thornhill, Bradford's wife. They've been documenting his crimes for years. They sent me the initial package, then agreed to testify in person. Sterling's face went pale. Both of them are cooperating? Fully. They have additional evidence, video recordings of executive meetings, current contracts, names of officials still being paid. Everything we need to prove the conspiracy is ongoing. Then Bradford knows. If his own family has betrayed him, Bradford will be moving to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. We know. That's why we're going public today. 6 p.m. Eastern. Simultaneous release to media, law enforcement, and congressional oversight. We flood the zone before he can react. Sterling sat down on a wet bench, heedless of the rain. His hands were shaking. I've been running for 5 years. 5 years of hiding, watching my wife from a distance, living like a criminal because I tried to do the right thing. He looked up at her. You're telling me it ends today? If you're willing to testify, we need your expertise to authenticate the technical documents. Need you to explain the engineering fraud in terms investigators can understand. Nathaniel can prove the financial conspiracy, but you can prove the equipment was deliberately sabotaged. They'll kill me. They'll try. But once this is public, once you're a known witness in a major investigation, killing you becomes counterproductive. It just confirms everything we're alleging. That didn't stop them before. Before, they were operating in shadows. Isolated whistleblowers could be eliminated quietly. This is different. This is coordinated exposure with multiple witnesses and overwhelming evidence. The rules change when the light comes on. Sterling was quiet for a long time. Rain fell around them, steady and cold. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Normal life continuing while they sat planning the destruction of a billion-dollar conspiracy. Your father, Sterling finally said, Tom Blackwood. I knew he was investigating Thornhill. We were supposed to meet, compare notes, maybe coordinate our approaches. But he died before we could connect. They murdered him, cut his brake lines, made it look like an accident. I know. When I heard about his death, I knew I was next. Started making contingency plans. 3 months later, they came for me. His voice was distant, remembering. I was driving home from work. Mountain road, curves and switchbacks. Brakes failed at 60 miles per hour. Should have died. Would have died if I hadn't spent years doing defensive driving training, if I hadn't been paranoid enough to recognize sabotage. But you survived. Crashed through a guardrail, vehicle rolled 3 times, ended up in a ravine 50 feet down, climbed out somehow, called Jennifer from a burner phone, told her I had to disappear. He looked at Evelyn. She thought I was crazy, thought the crash had damaged my brain, but I convinced her. Told her about Patricia Morrison, about the pattern of deaths, about what would happen if Thornhill thought I'd survived. So you've been dead for 5 years. In every way that matters, yes. Sterling Hayes died in that ravine. The man who survived is someone else, someone careful, someone invisible. Evelyn sat down beside him. I need that man to be brave one more time. Come back from the dead. Testify. Help me finish what my father started. Sterling pulled off his glasses, wiped rain from the lenses. If I do this, if I come forward, Jennifer becomes a target. They'll go after her to get to me. We can protect her. Witness protection, federal marshals, full security until the trials are over. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise that if we don't stop Thornhill now, more people die. More soldiers, more whistleblowers, more families destroyed. Your silence keeps you safe but changes nothing. Your testimony ends this. He put his glasses back on, looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and carried too much weight. You're as stubborn as your father was. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't one. Tom's stubborn got him killed. Sterling stood slowly. But he was right. And you're right. Some things matter more than safety. You'll testify? I'll testify. But we do this smart. Full security. Federal protection for Jennifer. Everything in writing before I go public. Evelyn felt relief wash through her. Agreed. We have FBI standing by. Deputy Director will take your statement this afternoon. Congressional briefings follow. Then media release at 6 p.m. What about Nathaniel and Margaret? If Bradford realizes his own family betrayed him, there's no telling what he'll do. They know the risks. They've accepted them. Margaret says she wants her godson's death to mean something. Nathaniel wants his father to know it was him who brought everything down. Sterling shook his head. That family is poison, all of them, using each other, destroying each other. Does it matter? As long as they destroy Thornhill Defense in the process? I suppose not. He pulled out a phone, sent a quick text. Jennifer needs to be extracted, now, before Bradford realizes what's happening. Already arranged. Gus has a team in Oregon. They'll bring her here within 6 hours. They walked out of the park together. Evelyn kept scanning for threats, kept waiting for the moment when Thornhill's people would appear, and this fragile alliance would shatter into violence. But the morning stayed quiet, just rain and empty paths, and the slow realization that maybe, possibly, they were going to survive this. Back at the hotel, Sterling looked up as they entered. Sterling Hayes, I've read your engineering reports. Your work was meticulous. And your father buried it, got people killed because of it. Yes, he did. Nathaniel's voice was flat. I'm trying to make that right. By betraying your family? By stopping a murderer who happens to share my DNA, there's a difference. Sterling studied him for a moment, then nodded. I suppose there is. The FBI deputy director arrived at 2 p.m. Marcus Holloway was 62 years old, with the kind of presence that came from 30 years of investigating corruption at the highest levels. He'd built cases against senators, Pentagon officials, corporate executives. He was known for being relentless, incorruptible, and absolutely unwilling to back down once he started. Gus had chosen well. Holloway listened to their presentation without interruption, reviewed the documents, watched the video evidence of Bradford Thornhill ordering Thomas Blackwood's murder. His expression never changed, but something cold settled in his eyes. How long have you had this evidence? 6 days, Evelyn said, since the anonymous package arrived. And you didn't bring it to the FBI immediately because? Because we had reason to believe Thornhill had sources inside federal law enforcement. We needed to verify the evidence, identify trustworthy contacts, and build protections before going official. Smart. Paranoid, but smart. Holloway closed his laptop. This is a RICO case. Conspiracy, fraud, murder. It touches Pentagon procurement, congressional oversight, and multiple federal agencies. It's going to be the biggest defense contractor scandal in American history. Can you prosecute it? Can I? Yes. Will I be allowed to? He paused. That depends on how public this becomes and how quickly. Thornhill has friends everywhere. If they get advance warning, evidence will disappear. Witnesses will recant. Officials will claim ignorance. But if this breaks fast and loud, if media pressure forces transparency, then yes, I can put Bradford Thornhill and everyone who helped him in federal prison for the rest of their lives. We're releasing everything at 6 p.m. Every document, every video, every name, simultaneous distribution to major media outlets, congressional committees, and law enforcement agencies. Holloway smiled grimly. Then I'd better start assembling my prosecution team. We're going to need a lot of lawyers. He spent the next 2 hours taking statements. Sterling's technical testimony about the engineering fraud, Nathaniel's insider knowledge of the financial conspiracy, Evelyn's analysis of the document trails and communications, Flint's corroboration of Thomas Blackwood's investigation. By 4 p.m., they had everything documented, witnessed, and legally preserved. Senator Morrison's chief of staff arrived next. Catherine Morrison was Patricia's sister, the one who'd never believed the home invasion story, who'd been pushing for investigation for 6 years. When she saw the evidence, when she watched video of Bradford Thornhill ordering her sister's murder, her expression went cold and hard. How long until this goes public? 2 hours. I need to brief the senator. She'll want to call for immediate hearings, full congressional investigation. Catherine pulled out her phone. This ends Bradford Thornhill. It also ends the careers of 8 sitting members of Congress. There's going to be chaos. Good, Evelyn said. Chaos makes it harder to suppress. At 5 p.m., Gus's team arrived with Jennifer Hayes. The reunion between Sterling and his wife was quiet, intense, 5 years of separation compressed into a long embrace and whispered words Evelyn couldn't hear. She gave them privacy and focused on final preparations. The media packages were ready, encrypted files uploaded to secure servers. Journalists at 6 different outlets standing by with advanced copies, waiting for the embargo to lift. Congressional staffers prepared to release statements. FBI ready to announce investigation. Everything synchronized for maximum impact. At 5:30 p.m., 30 minutes before going public, Bradford made his move. A bomb threat called into the hotel where they were coordinating. Not real, just enough to force evacuation. In the chaos, 2 of Bradford's security team moved in. Gus spotted them. "Evelyn, they're coming for Nathaniel. Get him to the vehicle. Now!" Flint grabbed Nathaniel, pushed him toward the emergency stairs. Evelyn provided cover, weapon drawn. Gus and his team engaged Bradford's men in the lobby. Gunfire, screaming civilians, hotel security overwhelmed. They made it to the parking garage. Gus's voice in the earpiece. "I'm hit. Left shoulder. Team has me. Get Nathaniel out. Finish this." Evelyn felt ice in her gut. "Gus, that's an order, Captain. You finish what your father started. I'll be fine." The line went dead. They drove to a backup location, a rented office space 3 blocks away, set up laptops, re-established communications with media contacts, verified all dead man switches were active. At 5:45, Evelyn's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then recognized the encryption pattern, the same source who'd sent the original warnings. "Hello? You're about to go public." The voice was distorted, electronically altered. Female, Evelyn realized. Bradford Thornhill knows. He's not going to let this happen quietly. "We have protection. Federal agents, security teams." Not enough. He's desperate. At 6 p.m., Bradford is going to make a statement. He's going to claim this entire investigation is fabricated, that his son is mentally unstable, that the documents are forgeries, and he's going to produce evidence that appears to support those claims. Evelyn felt ice in her stomach. What kind of evidence? Fabricated psychiatric records for Nathaniel, metadata showing the documents were created recently, not years ago. Expert testimony from people he's paid to lie. It won't hold up under scrutiny, but it will muddy the waters, create doubt. Can we counter it? You need irrefutable proof, something Bradford can't deny or explain away. We have video of him ordering murders. He'll claim it's deepfake technology. Without authentication from multiple independent experts, it becomes he said, she said. You need something he can't dispute. Evelyn looked at Nathaniel. "What's the one thing your father can't explain away?" Nathaniel thought for a moment, then his eyes widened. "The offshore accounts. He can claim the videos are fake, claim the documents are forged, claim I'm lying, but the money trail is real. Bank records, transaction logs, shell company formations. That evidence exists independent of anything we provided. Can we access it in the next 15 minutes? I have the account numbers, the routing codes, everything needed to verify the accounts exist and trace the payments." He pulled up files on his laptop, but getting official confirmation from foreign banks will take time. The distorted voice spoke again. "Send me the account numbers. I'll have confirmation within 10 minutes. Who are you?" "Margaret Thornhill, Bradford's wife. I started this investigation 3 years ago. I sent you the original files. I've been protecting all of you from the shadows, and now I'm going to finish what we started." The line went dead before Evelyn could respond. They worked frantically. Nathaniel compiled account information. Flint coordinated with journalists. Holloway prepared FBI statements. Catherine Morrison briefed Senate Oversight Committee. At 5:55, confirmation came through. bank records from 3 separate financial institutions, official documentation showing millions in payments flowing from Thornhill Defense shell companies to numbered accounts belonging to Pentagon officials and congressional staffers. The evidence Bradford couldn't explain away, couldn't claim was fabricated, couldn't dispute without admitting the accounts existed. At exactly 6 p.m. Eastern, the story broke. Washington Post led with, "Defense contractor bribery scheme, billions in fraud, dozens implicated." New York Times ran, "Pentagon officials received millions in Thornhill payments." CNN opened with breaking news coverage. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Social media exploded. Congressional phones lit up. Pentagon spokespeople issued no-comment statements, and Bradford Thornhill appeared on television. They watched him from the backup office. The man was 70 years old, former four-star general, with the bearing and confidence of someone who'd commanded armies and bent governments to his will. He stood at a podium outside Thornhill Defense Headquarters, surrounded by lawyers and corporate security. "These allegations are completely false, fabricated by a mentally unstable family member and disgruntled former employees. The so-called evidence is a combination of forgeries and lies." He deployed the defense Margaret had warned about: psychiatric records, expert witnesses, manufactured doubt. But it didn't matter, because the bank records were already public. Financial institutions were confirming the accounts existed. Reporters were tracing the payments. The money trail was real, documented, irrefutable. Bradford's narrative was dead on arrival. Within an hour, the first Pentagon official resigned, then a second. Congressional members started issuing statements distancing themselves from Thornhill. The network was collapsing as everyone scrambled to avoid being caught in the blast. At 7 p.m., FBI announced raids on Thornhill defense facilities in 12 states, simultaneous execution of search warrants, seizure of records, preservation of evidence. Marcus Holloway appeared on national news. "The FBI is investigating credible allegations of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy involving Thornhill Defense Industries and multiple government officials. This investigation is ongoing, and we expect additional charges to be filed." At 8 p.m., Senator Morrison called for emergency hearings, full congressional investigation, suspension of all Thornhill contracts pending review. At 9 p.m., trading in Thornhill defense stock was halted. The company's value had dropped 60% in 3 hours. At 10 p.m., Bradford Thornhill was arrested. Federal agents appeared at his estate in Virginia, read him his rights on camera, walked him out in handcuffs while news helicopters circled overhead. Evelyn watched it happen live on television, watched the man who'd ordered her father's murder being led away in federal custody, felt something cold and hard loosen in her chest. "It's over," Flint said quietly. "No, it's just starting. The investigation, the trials, years of legal battles. But the exposure part is done. The truth is out. That's what matters." At the hospital, they found Gus in surgery. The shoulder wound was serious but not fatal. He'd stayed in the fight long enough to neutralize both of Bradford's men, then collapsed from blood loss. When he woke up in recovery, Evelyn was there. "Did you finish it?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Thornhill was arrested 2 hours ago." Gus smiled. "Then it was worth it. Your father would be proud." Sterling and Jennifer sat together in the hotel room, hands clasped, watching the news coverage with expressions of stunned disbelief. 5 years of hiding, 5 years of fear, ending in a single evening of coordinated revelation. Nathaniel stood at the window, staring out at Seattle's lights. His phone buzzed, a text from his ex-wife. "William is safe. The men following him are gone. What did you do?" He showed Evelyn the message. "You saved your son," she said. "That's what you did." 3 days later, Evelyn stood in Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60, where recent casualties were buried. She found the graves of the 23 soldiers killed in the helicopter crash. rows of white headstones marking lives cut short by equipment that should have worked. She placed flowers at each grave, spoke quiet words about justice delayed but not denied, promised them that the people responsible would pay. At Thomas Blackwood's grave, she knelt in the grass. The headstone was simple, military standard. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Blackwood, dedicated father, faithful servant. I finished it, Dad. Took 6 years, but I finished what you started. Thornhill is arrested. The network is collapsing. Everyone who helped him is being investigated. It's done. The cemetery was quiet around her, just wind moving through trees and the distant sound of traffic. I met Sterling Hayes. He survived. He's testifying. Said you two were supposed to meet, compare notes. Would have been quite the team. She smiled despite the tears. I think you would have gotten along. Both stubborn, both unwilling to quit even when it was dangerous. She placed her hand on the cold stone. I miss you, every day. But I understand now why you kept investigating even when it got dangerous. Some things matter more than safety. Truth matters. Justice matters. Protecting the people who can't protect themselves matters. A figure appeared beside her, Flint standing quietly, giving her space but offering presence. He'd be proud of you, Flint said. Tom always believed in finishing what you started, following through. You did that. We did that. You, Gus, Sterling, Nathaniel, Margaret, all of us together. But you led. You pushed forward when it would have been easier to quit. That's what makes the difference. They stood in silence for a while. Then Evelyn stood, wiped her eyes, and faced him. What happens now? Now you write the definitive account, full investigation, book length, every detail. You make sure history remembers what happened and why it mattered. 6 months later, the trials began. Bradford Thornhill faced 137 counts of fraud, conspiracy, bribery, and murder. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, video recordings, financial records, testimony from Sterling Hayes, testimony from Nathaniel Thornhill, documents that traced 15 years of systematic corruption. The defense claimed fabrication, mental illness, conspiracy against a patriot. Nobody believed them. The jury deliberated for 4 days, found Bradford Thornhill guilty on all counts, recommended life imprisonment without possibility of parole. 12 Pentagon officials pleaded guilty to avoid trial. 8 congressional members rather than face prosecution. 6 defense contractors entered settlement agreements that included criminal penalties and permanent bans from government contracting. The total financial recovery exceeded $4 billion. Returned to the Pentagon, redistributed to legitimate contractors, invested in improved safety standards and oversight. Congress passed the Blackwood-Morrison Defense Integrity Act, mandatory independent testing of all military equipment, whistleblower protections with teeth, lifetime bans for officials convicted of procurement fraud. Named for Thomas Blackwood and Patricia Morrison, the 2 investigators who died trying to expose the conspiracy. Evelyn won the Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism. She accepted it wearing her father's Army ring, the one they'd given her after his funeral. She dedicated the award to him, to Sterling Hayes, to the 23 soldiers, to everyone who'd fought for truth against impossible odds. In her acceptance speech, she said, "Corruption survives in darkness. It withers in light. My father understood that. He died bringing that light. I just finished the job he started. That's what we do. We finish the job. Always." The audience stood and applauded for 5 minutes. That evening, at a quiet dinner with Flint, Sterling, Jennifer, Gus, and Nathaniel, they toasted the victory, raised glasses to absent friends and completed missions. To Tom Blackwood, Flint said, who started this fight and never gave up, even when it cost him everything. To truth, Sterling added, which survives longer than the people who try to bury it. To stubborn journalists, Gus said with a slight smile, who don't know when to quit. Thank God. Evelyn raised her glass to finishing what we start, no matter how long it takes, no matter what it costs. They drank. The moment stretched, comfortable and complete. Margaret Thornhill had disappeared after providing the bank records. Witness protection, Holloway had explained. She testified via video link, her identity protected, her location unknown. She'd get to see her grandson grow up, watch him not join an army equipped with defective gear. That night, Evelyn started writing the book, the full account. Every detail of the investigation, every twist and revelation. The story of how corruption was exposed and justice was served. She titled it, The Contractor's Daughter, How One Investigation Brought Down America's Most Corrupt Defense Company. It would become a bestseller, taught in journalism schools, used in ethics courses, referenced in congressional hearings about procurement reform. But more importantly, it would stand as a record, proof that truth mattered, that individuals could make a difference, that corruption, no matter how powerful, could be defeated by people willing to fight for what was right. Thomas Blackwood had believed that, had died believing it. His daughter had proven it. And somewhere in America, the next generation of investigators and journalists and whistleblowers would read that story and understand, this is what we do. We expose corruption. We demand accountability. We finish what we start. Always, no matter the cost. Because truth, in the end, is worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth everything. Evelyn Blackwood understood that now, understood it in her bones, the same way her father had. The work continued. It always continued. There would be more corruption to expose, more injustices to fight, more truths to drag into the light. But tonight, this victory was enough. Tonight, justice had been served, and Thomas Blackwood's daughter could finally rest, knowing she'd honored his legacy, knowing she'd finished what he started, knowing she'd made the world a little more honest, a little more just, a little better. One fight finished, the next one waiting. Evelyn Blackwood closed her laptop, picked up her press credentials, and walked back into the newsroom. There was always more work to do, and she was just getting started.